Hey everyone, welcome back to Aurelia in City Skylines. We started doing some of the city edges around these parts of the city with some final nature details, some landscaping, and low density neighborhoods. We also completed the overall area around the new library, as you can see, which turned out looking really great. Anyway, today we will continue building the little streams and canals, and we will also build a transition to the higher tier, which is going to be a dam with a roundabout built on top of it. We will also finish the high density stuff around here and build a new public transport transfer station. So let's go. So today's project is actually going to be all about junctions, all about connections of all the existing infrastructure, but even some new ones. So speaking of new infrastructure, I'm building or preparing some kind of a shape of a main avenue that's basically going to form the edge of the city for the rest of the Aurelia city. Okay, so that's a very, very important road. I was building it right on the side of the crater. Crater, of course, being a very old project in the entire Aurelia series. Built it a really, really long time ago. But that's going to be a very common theme in the coming episodes because we will have to see all of these old places, old projects, because we just need to expand them all the way to the rest of the city, to the edges, to the new edges that we are going to be continuing building. Now, speaking of the junctions, so first we are going to focus on the road junctions. So that's why I built that oval roundabout. And the oval roundabout is also going to be on top of a dam, and the dam itself is basically going to be a junction for the bodies of water in this area. So it's going to be, of course, a transition between some lower and higher level. The higher level is going to be something that I don't really want to spoil just yet, so I'm not really going to mention it that much. It's going to be super apparent in the next episode, I think. Let me think. I think in the next episode it's going to be really, really clear how the rest of the city is going to look like and where exactly that upper body of water is going to be, because in the next episode I'm going to do some really, really crazy changes to the map and basically the landscaping of the rest of the unbuilt areas. Now, on the lower side of the dam, there is going to be a junction, quotation marks, I guess, between the different second levels of these canals or little streams, rivers, however you want to call them. Now, I suppose a little recap is in order. So, Aurelia City, of course, had the original canal. That's the one that I built in like episode 3, 4, something like that. It was the first level, okay, first level. Now, then I continued building the second level and the third level of the first canal, and that was already a long time ago. Then, just a couple of months ago maybe, we built that canal, the second canal, first level of the second canal, with that sunken area where I did those huge blocks of like shopping malls and residential buildings and all that, right? It's the one where the trams were going, and it's actually the one that we could have seen in the tram ride not so long ago, okay? At the end of the tram ride. Now, this empty canal that I'm building right here today, that is the second level of that second canal, okay? And in the previous episode, we were doing the second level of the third canal. And as you can already guess, these two second levels, those are going to be exactly the levels that are going to meet in front of the dam on the lower side of it, okay? So it's basically going to be a junction of all these different modes of transportation, I almost said, but not really, right? It's just going to be like a one body of water. That's it. Now, public transport is also going to see some kind of a junction in this area, because that's exactly what I'm building right here. Because we have two lines that are converging into this place, and at the end I'm actually going to add a bus line in here just so that we can have more lines, right? Anyway, this is the light rail that we built this sunken station for 2 episodes back. So that's exactly the one. This is actually right next. This is the next station after that sunken station that we built. And we also have a tram line. That's the tram line from the last episode, which is then continuing into this low density area. And this is also a super ancient tram line because it's going into the crater that I mentioned couple of minutes ago. So as you can see, today's episode is actually tying together really a lot of places, a lot of projects, a lot of lines, and it's just completing this part of the city. So it's very, very important what we do here today. Anyway, let's comment more about what I'm building. So you can see that I really started to focus on this block. So at first I built the canal in it. I just really picked some random geometry, and then I focused on the public transport. Now we are building an elevated transfer station, and because we are kind of in a bit of a difficult situation when it comes to the grades and slopes of this public transport, because as you could have seen in the previous episode, the tram is going down quite steeply into the low density area, and obviously the light rail is coming up from that sunken station. It's sunken below the street level, right? So I didn't really have that many opportunities to just do like 5 different levels of different kinds of roads and rails and whatever. So I was kind of forced to do it on just the same level and had to cross those rails. But that's actually for the better, I suppose, because it's going to make the place a bit more compact. And we didn't really do that many places in the city where we would have these kinds of transfer stations on the same level. Now, from the top of my head, I can only remember the university, for example, that's built on one level, and the island that we also saw in the previous episode. That's or in the tram ride. That's where we saw that the rail whale coming right in front of us, right? So that's probably the only 2 stations in the city where we have these crossing lanes. So there is a precedent in the Aurelia series where I already did that, so why not do it here? Anyway, I'm doing some detailing, finishing this trench for the railway, for the light rail, I should say. I should really be clearer when I'm speaking of these. It might be a bit confusing, okay? So this is the light rail, okay? This is the light rail. Now, I really needed to, like I said, gather some height with the rails here. So right as it leaves the sunken station, it already needs to go up quite steeply, even though this grade is still like, I don't know, 4%, something like that. So it's fine for the light rail. And that means that I needed to do this kind of sloped detailing. So that's a bit of a problem, especially because I already decided that there are these different surfaces. Now, what I'm doing here, those are terrain networks. I think these are asphalt networks. I'm not exactly sure. Yeah, I think they are, because I also used asphalt surfaces, ploppable surfaces, in that sunken station. So I really needed to have the same texture, and I obviously copied even the color so it matches, and then I just used the node controller to really make it fit this area. Now, by the way, that's exactly the reason people ask me about it all the time. Why am I using the old version of node controller? I don't really want to say old, because both node controller mods right now have their place, their uses. So I don't know. I should probably say original node controller. Yeah, that's probably a better word. So that's exactly why I'm using it, because it has the functionality for these kinds of decorations. Yeah, sure, the new node controller is better for roads, I guess. I don't know, I haven't used it, but from what I've seen, it's better for roads, more functionality for roads. But as you can see, especially in Aurelia, I'm using the node controller all the time for all kinds of networks. And for those, the original one is better at this point, okay? So that's the reason. Anyway, now I'm going to fill some of these blocks, because we also had all of these little places around the highway or around some different projects, around the canals and stuff, kind of empty, and I needed to finish them. So I really wanted to also continue doing some styles that I already established, either right next to these places or just in some other places in the city. So for example, right here, I'm just creating some really high density blocks, clipping buildings together and whatnot. And then I'm going to create this like an elevated grass park, which is exactly the same thing I did probably a couple of years ago on the other side of this infinity interchange, which is also super old at this point. Now, by the way, the infinity interchange, that's what I had to change. I had to change the interchange last episode because I needed to have this exit go into some of these main avenues a bit differently. And I was also thinking of perhaps doing it a bit more complicated, maybe reworking it, but eventually decided that I'm just going to keep it as it is because I really don't want to change already built areas in the city because, when I'm going to do one, I might as well just do all of them, right? Might as well just revisit the whole city and upgrade the detailing, play with the node controller for like intersections and whatnot. But I'm really not going to do that. So this is probably the best solution or the best approach to these kinds of extensions of already finished projects, to just use the styles that I already did back in the day. That's probably going to be for the better. Now, speaking of using styles that I did back in the day, I'm also copy-pasting, borrowing, let's call it, these kinds of like can-shaped buildings from the Green Cities DLC, by the way. These are vanilla. I know, hard to believe because they are looking really, really good. And I'm just using the same style as I did on that first level of the second canal, okay? I have to pay attention to the numbers of the canals and layers, so I'm not going to say it wrong because it might then get a bit confusing. But yeah, I think I said it right. Anyway, in this place, unlike the first one, we need to also cover some elevation and do some verticality. So I'm preparing all these kinds of retaining walls. I think that these are the Japanese retaining walls that I'm using all the time. They have the fence and fenceless variants, so they are absolutely perfect for these kinds of purposes. And then I'm just filling these empty spots with grass. So it's going to look like we have these different levels, and even the buildings themselves are kind of forming retaining walls, right? So there are probably some apartments that might have windows just into one side of the building, and roughly at one half of the height of the building, there is basically an entrance to these kinds of like gardens or open spaces or something like that. So that's kind of nice. But some of these elevated areas for the grass, those are completely inaccessible, as you can see. For example, this one, and they are just forming some kind of edges of like difficult to detail corners between roads or some kind of different detailing. So that's just like a nice thing to do to just cover some larger area, right? I'm also trying to angle some of these walls so that they are kind of copying the shapes of the buildings themselves, and it might look like the buildings are kind of cutting into the area and leaving some space, some kind of personal space around them open. So that's basically what I'm trying to aim for, because obviously I'm using the same buildings just like before, but I need to make it somewhat different, so it's not just going to be like a completely copy-paste area. So, this kind of a retaining wall element is exactly why I did this. But we kind of do need to, at the end of the day, make this area very similar to the previous one, because it is kind of the extension of it. So I was just taking a look at how I did that before, because I completely forgot it at this point. And I was just doing the canal edges with, for example, these pedestrian paths, which are also going to form the nice bridges over the canal, which is very important. This place is, by the way, going to be really busy with pedestrians who are going to go into that transfer station for the light rail and the trams. Now, also doing some details, some kind of original details, even though this one is not really that original, because I used this kind of tree-like looking network detailing before in the city so long a time ago. But, it kind of fits nicely in this area. And I think it kind of complements the detailing around the trench for the light rail. Now, by the way, it might not be super obvious from these kinds of shots, but I was aiming to create some sort of like a tree. It looks like a tree. You have these networks there that are kind of the branches or whatever. And at the end, you have the crown of the tree, right? So from a certain direction, it's looking like a tree. So hopefully I achieved that. So, but it's just like a nice thing to do there to finish off the trench for the light rail. Anyway, this is exactly what I was talking about, and this is probably going to give you a much, much better idea how this place is going to tie to the rest of the area. So as you can see, especially that shot. So as you can see, I was doing this landscaping. I was creating this river river shape in there so that it's all going to be interconnected. And then I obviously had to wait some time, so the water is finally going to flow into the canal and kind of stabilizes. So that unfortunately took some time. Now we are going to do the actual dam, and this took a really, really long time, especially with that loop for the light rail, because I was thinking that I'm going to extend the light rail into some of the residential areas that are going to follow, but I eventually decided against it because I would need to have some kind of a light rail station even on the dam itself. I was thinking it might go through the building that I'm placing there. I think that's the North Korean ice rink or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. I don't really want to insult anyone if this building is not from there, but sorry. I think it is though, and it's absolutely perfect. By the way, this was not planned before. It was just a complete coincidence that the building has the exact same diameter as the inside diameter of this roundabout. So I was really pleasantly surprised that that's the case. At first I wanted to place 2 of those buildings on each end, but then I decided to go for this. And I'm thinking of it as some kind of like a modern looking industrial building, or maybe some kind of industrial museum or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but this is supposed to be like a highly functional building. It's not just like a decoration or something. I mean, in the game it kind of is, obviously, as most buildings in Aurelia, but you know what I mean. I just really wanted to create this place slightly more industrial looking. So that's why I'm also doing these kinds of pipes as kind of outlets for the water from the higher level. And also I converted the vanilla police station into procedural objects and only extracted the towers. And they are going to just give you an idea that there might be some kind of a turbine perhaps under these kinds of caps, or how to call them. And it's just something to fill the area with, really. And it's kind of looking okay. So I also placed a water source on that higher level. The higher level right now is not really going to go anywhere, but if you are paying attention, it might already give you some clues to how the rest of the city is going to look like and what are going to be those long advertised big changes to the map that I'm always talking about, right? But they are not really going to be done today. I think they are going to be done mostly in the next episode, I think. Yeah, I think in the next episode it's going to be super clear how the rest of the map is going to look like. Anyway, I finished the roundabout, one side of the roundabout there, with these entrances into the low density area, and now it's all about doing the landscaping on the side of this highway, and also just, finish the landscaping just around the residential areas. So one branch of the roads go into the hills like that. At first I wanted to create some kind of like lonely skyscrapers in there, residential spires, but it kind of felt weird, so I eventually decided to just continue using these kinds of low density houses. Even though, as you can see in Aurelia, we actually do have a very high demand for residential. It's actually the same, the exact opposite compared to Altengrad, where I have lots of residential, but not that many jobs, workplaces. But in Aurelia, we really do need to focus on these residential areas, and that's pretty much what we are kind of naturally doing, on these edges of the city. Okay. Anyway, doing lots of trees, doing rocks on the sides of these retaining walls, on the dam walls, and just everywhere else where it might be fitting, and especially the trees though, especially the trees. I'm really trying to continue exactly the same like density and spacing between the different patches of trees, just like in the previous episode, so it's nicely going to blend together, and it's going to form this very natural looking edge of the city. Now, then I returned and did this final detailing on the transfer station. And this is actually something I wanted to try for a really long time, but it never occurred to me before. Whenever I'm doing these kinds of retaining walls, like big retaining walls, or forming with the retaining walls some kind of a shape that's kind of elevated, it has like a roof. Basically, the transfer station is on a roof of some kind of a building, let's call it. So why not actually turn the retaining wall into a building, so it's going to look like a building? So the easiest way to do that is obviously add windows on the sides. So that's exactly what I did there, and I think that it actually turned out looking really, really good. And it's probably something I'm going to consider doing even in some future projects, because it's just like a very simple and cheap way, let's call it, to create custom buildings, let's say, because it's very modern. If you think about it, you just have these bare concrete faces and only some really plain looking windows. It's looking very futuristic as well. So, I might do that even going into the future. Anyway, the last thing I needed to do was create some intersection marking tools with these very nice looking grass fillers on those entrances to the roundabout, and of course make it work with the traffic manager. Now, this is the before and after. You can hardly tell where exactly was the transition between the previous project that we did last time and today. So that's exactly what I was aiming for, to just tie these areas together and make it look almost seamless, right? So that's why we just continued doing the same styles of detailing, the same styles of buildings and stuff. And eventually I just, achieved this very harsh transition between the high density and low density places. And I really, really like how that turned out looking. Especially the bodies of water. Those are obviously the most important things in there. Not only they are creating some kind of a linear fill of some of these places, they're also bringing more colors into the area, because otherwise we don't have any blue in these places. It's all kind of white, grayish, and green, with the trees and grass. But now we finally have these bodies of water, the rivers in here, the streams, and I really do like them. So this project of the dam, it was actually super simple. It was just the road, the roundabout, and some retaining walls, a couple of detailing projects, buildings slapped on the top, and that was pretty much it. And it's looking good. I really like it. So that's one of the highlights of this general area. And of course, all these different projects are also kind of nice. Anyway, guys, next episode, I already kind of foreshadowed what we are going to do. We are going to do some super big landscaping changes to the rest of the map. Not really complete changes, but it's going to give you like 100% idea how it's going to go into the future, okay? So definitely stay tuned for the next episode. We are going to revisit some of the old projects as well. We are going to go towards the island city. We're not really going to do the island city itself, the orange structure in the lake, but we are going to go in front of it, and we are going to do some changes there. I'm going to continue some residential areas and do lots of new infrastructure, trams, of course. So that's something to stay tuned for. Anyway, that's going to be all for today's episode. Thank you for watching it. If you liked it, then you can put a thumbs up below the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new here, leave some comments, and you can also become a channel member to directly support this channel, what I do here, the cities that I built, and these kinds of things. Big thanks to all the channel members that we currently have. I really do appreciate it. So anyway, thanks again for watching. Take care and goodbye.